In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can calculate the Altman Z-score for publicly traded companies. And I'm going to share with you this template that I've created. So if you want to follow along, or if you just want to use it for your own purposes without having to recreate this, you can do so. Just follow the link in the description for this video. So how this template works is I've got a section for inputs and my outputs, my calculations for that Z-score, and then my lookup tables. So with the Altman Z-score, it's primarily designed to tell you if a company is in financial distress, if it's safe, or if it's within the gray zone. So that's based on these Z-score values, which are calculated here. So this value is going to look up this table to determine what classification it falls into. So this can help you in assessing whether a company is in financial distress, if it's safe, and whether it could potentially be a good investment. And there's also these weights that are applied to these different items. So we've got items A through E, and so we've got this listed on the output. So these are the different metrics that are tracked and calculated from these inputs. So as you can see, we're going to enter the inputs from the balance sheet, from the income statement, pull in the stock price, and then these outputs are going to do these calculations, help us arrive at a Z-score, and these weights are going to be applied. So there's different variations for this Altman Z-score. The one I'm using right now is primarily for manufacturing companies, so you can adjust the weights on here if you have a slightly different variation you want to use. But other than that, I'm going to walk you through a real example here and then show you how these formulas work. So in this example, I'm going to use Caterpillar, and I'm going to pull its financials just from Yahoo Finance. So I'm going to look at the values from 2024. So we've got total assets. We can open that up so we see current assets. Total liabilities here, we see current liabilities. So the idea is I'm just going to enter these values in here. So for current assets, I got 45,682 and all the zeros in there. So it's important to make sure we're using the same values, so in terms of thousands and millions, so we're not mixing anything together. So if I'm putting in all the zeros, I'm going to put in all the zeros for all the numbers as well. So for total assets, 87,764, 123, and then we've got current liabilities here, 32,272, 123, and then total liabilities, I'm going to put 68,270, 123, and then for retained earnings, I'm going to open this up here under stockholders' equity. We've got retained earnings there, 59,352. So the idea being that this sheet is organized in a way where, we can just go through the balance sheet. Once we're done with that, let's go over to the income statement and do the same thing. From the income statement, we're just pulling in the total revenue. So this is the trailing 12 months. I'm pulling the 2024 value here. So 64,809. And for EBIT, that's the same as basically operating income. So 13,072 is what I'm putting for that. And then for the shares outstanding, so here we've got basic average shares. So I'm going to use this value, 486,700. And I'm also going to populate the stock price as of the end of the year, as of the end of 2024. So I'm going to use this closing price, 362.76. So once I've got that entered in here, now my calculations are going to completely update. So now let's maximize this window here, and so I can show you how these are calculated. So for the working capital is just the current assets less the current liabilities, and then is dividing that by the total assets. So you can see the cells that are highlighted, that's what's being used in this calculation, and it's multiplying by that weighting. So in J4, that 1.2 weighting. For the next item, for retained earnings over total assets, it's just taking the retained earnings divided by total assets, multiplied again by that weighting there. For the EBIT over total assets, we're taking that EBIT value, that operating income divided by total assets, and again multiplying by that weighting for item C. And then we've got market value of equity divided by total liabilities. So for the market value, we're taking the shares outstanding, multiplying by the stock price, and then dividing that by the total liabilities, and then multiplying that by a factor of 0.6. And then for this last metric here, we've got sales divided by total assets. So we're taking the sales divided by total assets. And in this case, the weighting is just 1.0. So we really don't need this weighting, but just in case if you wanted to modify this, that's why I've left this in here. And then for the Z-score, it's doing a summation of all these values. So it gets us to 3.9, which is well above the gray zone and into the safe zone. So obviously Caterpillar being a fairly reputable and strong manufacturing company, it's a fairly safe investment, as its financials do seem to indicate that as well. And so right now what this is doing is summing up these values, and then I've got a lookup value here to say, look up this value in D25 and look it up in this table, pull in the second column, and then we're looking for not an exact match, but an approximate match. So that's why I set this last argument to true, because I don't want to look for exact matches. Otherwise, it's going to not categorize it properly. And so just like that, we can set up these calculations really easily and just go through these inputs for these different stocks that you may want to calculate this table for. So fairly straightforward template. The key thing is setting up a couple lookup tables and then making sure that these formulas are calculating properly and that we're pulling in the right values. So if you do see a variation between your Altman Z-score and one that you might find on a financial website, just consider the inputs you're inputting, because they might be using slightly different numbers. Consider the stock price, the shares outstanding. Those are two of the ones that may fluctuate based on where you're pulling it from, how up to date the numbers are. So if you do see a variation, that's it's probably going to be due just to one of these inputs being used differently. But other than that, the key thing is really just to find out, which classification it falls into, whether the stock you're looking at is indeed in financial distress, or if it's a relatively safe one. And at the end of the day, you're really focusing on which of these zones a stock falls into. Whether it's 3.9 or 3.95 or 4, not a huge difference. Ultimately, you're just trying to figure out whether the stock is in a safe zone, whether it's in the gray zone, or whether it's in financial distress. And with this template, that can help you do that, and just by populating these items. So you can pull these values right from Yahoo Finance and just populate these totals in here. Just remember to make sure that you're putting in the same values. So when you're swapping from balance sheet to income statement, if you're putting in thousands, always put in thousands. If you're putting in millions, always put in millions. Whatever the case may be, just be consistent to make sure your calculations are correct. So that's all right for this video. If you did like it, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.